Joining us today is Leanne, a seasoned bookkeeper with years of experience in the beauty industry, helping us guide Muskoka Aesthetics through the ups and downs and everything in between. With experiences and insider knowledge, she's guided us through the maze of numbers, financial reports, and strategies that will help your beauty business thrive. Let's dive into this episode for some bookkeeping updates that I think every business owner should know. Okay, we've got my longtime bookkeeper here, Leanne, with us. We were just saying, I think it's almost 8 years that we've been working together, and I'm excited to hear your story of, like I said, we've worked together for so long, but actually to sit down and have a conversation with you with, business related, but also like personal at the same time. So I'm excited to hear all about it, Leanne, and you have the floor to chat a little bit how you got into bookkeeping.
Yeah, for the 8 years thing, it's funny. I was thinking, "Oh, yeah, like, we've been working together 5 years," but yeah, you're right, 8 years. It's been a long
Mhm.
time, and I've loved it because 'cause I've seen your business grow from the beginning, like a lot of my customers. So, I got started in the industry, oh gosh, let's say probably 10 years ago now. Um, Definitely this was never what I was going to do. I was focusing more on the creative side of, my life. I wanted to do hospitality and tourism, interior design, decorating, event planning, and I found that it was so gray. Like I thought those industries were like a lot of personal opinion. Um, and so my mom has actually been doing bookkeeping and in the financial world for as long as I can remember. She used to run my dad's businesses. She's had her own businesses. And so I kind of just fell into it through her. And I actually started working originally. And then when the pandemic hit, I was kind of like, I want to do this on my own. And so I kind of just fell into running my own business and doing my own thing bookkeeping wise. So just fell into it, which I think that happens with a lot of people. Like when you're young, you
Mhm.
don't know what you want to do. And I guess that's kind of, I guess, thanks to my mom.
Yeah. Well, and I also feel like when you test, like you're like, oh, I think this is what I want to do, and you get kind of in that testing it out, and then you're like, okay, this is not something I want to do. Like I definitely did that in a couple different industries before. And you know what, I should have probably listened to my mom off the get-go, because she always said you should get into hair or aesthetics. I just like rebelled the whole time. And then
Yes,
I started getting my nails done and doing that kind of thing, and then fell in love with it. I'm like, okay, maybe she does know me better than I know myself.
right. That's usually the way. And I was so against numbers. I was like, I'm not sitting at a desk all day, not doing that. And then the more I got into it and started to learn, I was like, this is really valuable. Like
Mhm.
every single business, doesn't matter what type of business you run, a bookkeeper is valuable to anybody.
Mhm.
So I was like, that's easy. Like, this is what I want to do. So
Mhm.
yeah, it
And
worked out really well.
And I also feel like you're so organized, like both you and your sister are so organized. And like, I'm like, do you have this? Or I'm like scrambling for paperwork, and you guys always have the answers for things. And you're just like on board too. Like when the business is growing or different strategies, I'm also asking your opinion, because you're just as part of this business as well. Like that's what I always say to people. You always need a good bookkeeper to back your business up, because they're the ones that can help you thrive, to help you grow, to help you problem solve moving forward with your business, and also great input. I always have asked like yours or our accountant's input on business decisions, because you guys do see the numbers, and you're making me better at seeing the numbers too and understanding them. Now, when someone's starting a business, one of the most common questions I know we get asked, like from some of my friends or people sending us messages as well, is when starting a business, what is the pros and cons of like incorporation or sole proprietor when someone's going to open? Because right now, like we're going through changing the spa from a sole proprietor now to incorporation, and it's a lot easier to just do that from the get-go instead of doing all this back and forth. So what are some of the things you would suggest, like people starting their businesses, what direction they should go into?
Yeah, so I find that most of the time when people are starting a business, it starts off as a sole proprietorship. That's usually the easiest way to do it because a lot of people don't know if starting the business, is that what they're going to stick with? Do they want to have their own business? So I find that, there really are pros and cons to both. To incorporate, obviously there's more expense involved. You have to have an accountant for sure for your year end. You have to have lawyers involved yearly. Once you get incorporated, there's a thing called a minute book, which just sure all of your financials are in order. You're not doing anything incorrectly. So it's really hard to say. A lot of the times, to be honest, I rely on asking an accountant for their opinion on it. A lot of the times I find it falls down to what are the profits? What are the gross sales? Because if you're only making $10,000 a year, maybe it's not worth that extra expense every year to incorporate. It is a tricky one for me. Like, I'm still a sole proprietor right now. Like, I haven't hit that stage where I feel like I need to incorporate. Now, as you add employees, your business is just a little bit more protected when it's incorporated. If you run a business that has a lot of assets, also a good idea to incorporate or even have a holding company to protect those assets, to protect those profits. That's typically what I tell a lot of my customers. Like I said, most people start off as sole proprietor. And I mean, you've been now in the industry for 8 years and you're just incorporating now. Like, it takes time to get to that stage where it makes sense to incorporate, to spend that extra money, to have that security for yourself personally and your business. So there's not really one answer to say, like, when is the best time to incorporate. It is business to business. Even spa, like, you're now kind of a medi spa. So your liability is a little bit greater than somebody who's maybe just doing kind of like the aesthetic side of things, right? So it makes sense for you to incorporate, whereas somebody who's been in the industry for maybe 10 years doing nails and lashes, they might not be at that stage yet. They don't have those profits. So it's really like a case by case scenario.
Yeah, definitely. And I think understanding, like, for us too, like, we're the sole proprietor, that is your own money. And then in corporation, like, then you can start paying yourself, but you can't start like taking funds from that account without it being a business reason. I think that's something else that when starting a business, like for myself, I knew I wanted to buy a home, like all these different things that I knew I was going to have to start kind of dipping some of my personal finances through that too. So I think that's another thing that people don't understand with incorporation is that is the business money. And then you're going to have your own money separate from the incorporation. So that's another highlight, I think, with sole proprietor versus corporation.
Oh, for sure. And I know a lot of people, when they have like a sole proprietorship, they see, oh my gosh, like, I've made so much money this year. And then it's like, yeah, you have to pay tax on that money. So that's kind of a downside to a sole proprietorship. Whereas once you're incorporated, if you're pulling a salary every month or biweekly, whatever it is, then that money's already taxed kind of through the business. And then at the end of the year, whatever profits you have, like, you're in a lower tax bracket in a corporation. So that's always a plus to some people. But you are right. Once you're incorporated, business is business and personal is personal. And that is something I find I'm constantly having to drill into my clients. Like, do not mix the cards. Like, if you're going out for like a fancy dinner in Toronto, like, that's personal unless you can prove to me that's business. So things like that. But it's a learning curve for everybody. Even if you've had your business for 5-10 years and you've been a sole proprietor, now you're learning about the corporate side of things and the corporation and kind of what to do and what not to do. So I think business owners are constantly learning in that regard.
On this podcast, we always talk about nutrition and how important our gut health is, as well as how our brains function when we're eating superfoods and obviously the convenience of having those available. Personally, I'm like a low-key, non-prep, don't like to be in the kitchen kind of person. And I'm sure a lot of my entrepreneurs and busy moms and busy people listening can completely relate to this. Now, if you haven't tried Revive or heard of it, it's definitely a game changer. With my promo code and my affiliate links linked below, you will be able to receive 50% off your first order / box of these delicious pre-portioned super foods that can be delivered right to your door with free delivery at checkout. So just hit the link below for the affiliate links as well as the promos to get 50% off your first box of these delicious pre-portioned meals that you're going to be thanking me for later. And that's where it's been like, because our product line business has been incorporated right from the get-go. But that was like kind of a learning curve too, like with the minute book, learning all those things with the lawyer. So it was kind of an interesting way that having a sole proprietor as well as incorporation at the same time, but with two totally different businesses. But I know that it's like a very common thing we get asked a lot in like the spa business world is like the incorporation and sole proprietor. So all of that information I feel like is so helpful, because also the liability of like with personal assets, like if I get sued, let's say from the spa, and then my house, all my personal assets are exposed to that as well. So it's giving you that extra layer of protection with the incorporation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, especially like contractors and construction companies, like they usually incorporate a lot sooner. Um, but if you want that security, then obviously it makes sense to kind of incorporate the business, have everything separate.
Mhm.
I mean, and that's why a lot of companies do hold codes as well. So
Yeah.
if you're really large, you have a holding company which holds any profits from the year previous. You kind of push money into that account. You're just protecting everything. And I
Mhm.
feel like in this day and age, it's kind of sad to say, but you have to look out for yourself. You got to protect yourself always.
Exactly, 100%. And that's another thing about starting to pay yourself. Like I've never really paid myself with a salary or anything like that because it's always been within the business as a sole proprietor. So whenever I needed funds, I would just go from that account. So that's another thing is training ourselves like to be able to pull a salary, having that income coming in. But it takes a while. Like I said, like it's been 8 years and I'm just gonna start paying myself accordingly with the business too. So I think people just look at businesses and they're like, "Oh, well, like they're thriving or this is happening." So it's kind of a nice way to like break this down in this conversation of like, "Oh, it's taken us like 8 years to get to this point." I mean, COVID obviously was a huge part of impact on our industry, but that's another thing you were super helpful with of having a bookkeeper that's like up to date on things going on, because it was great to have you with like, okay, let's look at the SIBA loans, let's look at this, let's see what makes the most sense to get us through this, and having that support system of someone to be able to ask those questions and who has the answers too.
Oh, absolutely. And, not that anybody enjoyed COVID, but I learned so much out of that. And just to see how industries can adapt so quickly to
Mhm.
something like that. I mean, and I saw it with you too, doing your at home like spa kits and stuff. It was incredible to see everybody across the board, like how well people can adapt and how well you learn. And now things have actually changed permanently because of that. And a lot of things for a positive, in the way that we kind of communicate with our customers, how we can do more like online shopping. I know you transitioned a lot
Mhm.
to the
Definitely.
online world during COVID, which I think, not that it was a good thing, but positive things did come out of it for a
Mhm.
lot of small business.
Well, I know with us, like I was like, "Oh, great, we're closed for 2 weeks. I get to like have a mini vacation for once." But like when we heard that it kept extending, I'm like, "Hey, this is my time to reset our online booking system to really dive into what's going on like behind." I know we got like the QuickBooks online. We were like updating all these different things to make our lives easier, because how often is a bookkeeper or how often is a business owner paused to be able to kind of
Mhm.
reset things and look at their business without working in it. They're actually looking back and reflecting on what could be better, because that's where I kind of took advantage. I was like, okay, let's try to do all these things I've been wanting to do in the past how many years, and let's make it happen. So I totally agree with you. Even at the spa, there's things that we don't do anymore. Like we still don't have a waiting room for our clients, and it's actually utilizing more space because we're in a very tight space with the amount of girls. And it was great because now those 2 stations where someone would be sitting waiting, we now offer 2 services in that area. Um, Same with coffee, water, and tea. We used to offer those as services all the time, and we couldn't during COVID. And I kind of got feedback from clients, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't really need to have that when we're in there for services." Plus, we were throwing out so much waste and more cups and disposable things where we try to be as eco-friendly as possible. So there was a lot of things that were good feedback as well through that experience. So I totally agree with you. What was some of the software like that you recommend? I know I just mentioned QuickBooks Online, but is there softwares that you suggest your clients using when onboarding a business or when they're already in a business?
Yeah, so definitely the only software I use is QuickBooks Online. I have tried out other programs and they just don't seem to have the versatility that QuickBooks does. So I like it because it's simple for my clients to kind of hop on. They can see things really easily. I can guide them to where they need to go and kind of what areas they should be focusing on. So that's definitely like my number one. I know there are still people out there who use Excel spreadsheets or they just have a stack of receipts that go to the accountant at the end of the year. And it's just, it doesn't take long to set up QuickBooks. It's easy. Yeah, there's a cost to it, but the time savings is unbelievable.
Oh, the
Within
SNAP
QuickBooks,
receipts, like the SNAP receipts. I just was doing that yesterday. Like it's changed my like entire organization of my wallet or my wallet as well as my office. Just taking pictures of the receipts, uploading them as well as like the kilometers. There's so many things that it offers.
oh, yeah, time tracking. Like QuickBooks is now starting to come out with their own apps that links with their program. So they're going to be flawless because they've developed them. I mean, there are thousands of apps that link with
Mhm.
different programs, QuickBooks probably being one of the biggest ones. Um, but yeah, like, I mean, it's so industry specific, but QuickBooks Online, like you said, the snap receipts is unbelievable. I know, like with a lot of my clients, and even with you, I remember I'd have to, okay, Nicole, like, do you have your files ready? And I'd have to like drive over to the spa, pick everything up, which like I loved it because I got out of the office, but just being able to have immediate access to customer information, their receipts, like vendor bills, payments, it keeps everything up to date by the day and if not like the week, which is unbelievable considering it used to be, monthly or quarterly that people were
Mhm.
kind of seeing their numbers and now you're seeing them in real time, which is amazing.
Oh,
But I
also the
highly recommend.
email, what was the email one? Oh, when it was like the email, that you made for each business, then like if I get an email receipt, because usually we're getting a lot of those invoices through email, then I just forward it right to the QuickBooks too, which is so handy. So it keeps your paperwork at home clean. It makes all your invoicing on your email clean and receipts and everything, just sending those over too.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is that then if you're ever going back through and you're like, oh, it was like in June I had bought something
Mhm.
from what a vendor, it's linked. It's actually linked into your QuickBooks. So you don't need to go digging through papers and files and maybe a disorganized filing cabinet. Like it's
Yeah.
right there in QuickBooks and it's linked. And so my like the number one thing for anybody starting small business, even if you're not going to hire a bookkeeper right away, get on QuickBooks Online, familiarize yourself with that so then one day when you are bigger, you're ready for a bookkeeper, everything's already online. You know the system. And I think that's big. Like clients really need to know like their numbers.
Mhm.
Like you really like you can't rely on your bookkeeper to be like, yeah, you're doing really good or oh, you're not doing like I think it's so important. And I know you've gotten really good at that, Nicole. Like you'll be like, oh, I noticed this. Like
Yeah.
it's time to incorporate. It's just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
fantastic. She's looking at her numbers. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's another thing is keeping yourself accountable. Like, I know it's so hard. Like, we just want to work, 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 please our clients, make sure we're in the treatment rooms or like pampering our clients because we've got that waiting list to get people through. But you're not going to better your business unless you look back and see what's working and what not isn't working. Like, even looking at your spending and like making even a spreadsheet on where your vendors are, where you're purchasing them from, and what makes the most sense on who's the best price, maybe like the free shipping options, and that kind of breakdown I feel like makes a huge difference of knowing your profit and loss. And yeah, I was looking at our spreadsheets and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, with everything's updated, you and Teresa keep everything updated on those profit and loss sheets. I'm like, okay, as of 6 months this year, we need to incorporate because this is what it's going to look like. And talking about taxes too, like you can see all of that information right on the QuickBooks.
Peaches, word of mouth marketing for Squarespace stores. Make more sales with Peaches Squarespace plugins. Get the #1 referral and affiliate software for your e-commerce store. Everyone wants to boost sales and reach new customers via affiliates or referrals marketing programs. Word of mouth marketing is the best and most powerful, low cost, and way to grow your business online organically. All you need to do is get the right software to help your customers talk about you and influencers promote you and reward them for doing so. I will put my referral link down below.
No, exactly. And I think that's one thing that we've started, excuse me, focusing on more this year is looking at, excuse me,
No.
where your like what areas are profitable for you and maybe which ones aren't so much. And then it also gives you an idea, well, maybe I need to increase these rates a little bit, or maybe this is just not a service we're going to offer or a product we're going to offer anymore. And I mean, you can go so detailed into your profit and loss, and it's really up to, I guess, a collaboration of like the client and the bookkeeper deciding how much detail do we need? How much do we want to see? But you can customize those reports to you and your business and exactly what you want to be achieving within your
Mhm.
business.
Mhm. And that's a really good point about the services, because you and I have had that conversation as well of like, okay, which services makes the most sense for us to bring in? Because also like when it comes to wages, like we have employees on ours where well, we have contractors as well, but each spa is run differently with their staff and how they're getting paid and what makes the most sense at the end of the day. But for us to be able to provide more income for our staff and employees and members, like we need to be offering a more premium service to be able to offer that and to make the business better. So yeah, looking at which services makes the most sense for us and how much each service is even costing us. I feel like as a spa owner, a lot of people don't do that. They're like, oh, I'm going to charge it at this amount because the person down the street who's working from home is charging this. When you have a spa overhead expenses, employees, all these expenses where that other person may not. So that's something that I stress to people too, is like, look at like how much an eyebrow wax is actually costing you, or look at how much a gel nail set is costing you, a hydrofacial, looking at the breakdown, because that should be your number, like your breakdown of what that is costing you as your expense, and then figuring out what you're going to charge that service out at.
Oh, absolutely. And I like that you brought up the comparison of having an actual location to go to versus a home spa. Like that really does make a huge
Mhm.
difference in what you are charging out to your customers. And, and another thing is if the quality is there, people are going to pay. And
Mhm.
once they're comfortable with, the girls they're coming to see, it's going to be really hard for them to leave to go somewhere else, even if there is a lower price somewhere, because they have like that comfortable space. They know where they're coming to. Like, I like the location that you have because you're going to a spot. It's peaceful, it's calm, it's quiet. Like if you go to somebody's house, like do they have dogs running around barking?
Yeah.
Do they have kids upstairs? Like you don't know, right? I
Mhm.
mean, unless you
Mhm.
actually been there and you've gone for services and stuff. But I really do like that you brought that up because pricing can vary greatly depending on how you're operating your business and where, like
Mhm.
home spa versus an actual location, huge difference for sure.
Because we get that a lot, or even our Florida ladies that come back in the summer versus the winter. It's like, oh well, I pay this much in the States. I'm like, okay, number one, the cost of the dollar is a huge comparison right there. But location, like you might have people coming from the city to your spa, or vice versa, and it's like they're comparing geographic locations as well as where you are. And that's something like we stand so strongly behind, like our quality over quantity. Like And like you said, like we try to make it as peaceful. It's like escape from reality. That's what we want it for people to be able to come and enjoy themselves. And even for you, you're as a bookkeeper, I feel like when I come to talk to you in your office, I feel like we never see each other in person anymore, even though we like live so close. But it's like it's an environment that you know that you're like getting your work done, you know that you're getting your treatment. It's just enjoyable. And that's what, if you're bringing a staff member into a situation where it's not somewhere they enjoy being either. Like I've worked at spas that I did not enjoy where I was working, and it's creating that safe space for an employee or even for a client coming in. So that's something too. We try to make it a happy place for everyone coming in to come to work or getting pampered.
No, of course, and definitely, like I didn't even mention, like staff for sure. Like, do you really want staff coming to your house and working out of your home where like your family is and everything? I mean, maybe not, and they're probably not as comfortable with that either. Like, this is like a neutral space, like your
Mm-hmm.
spa. It's neutral for everybody, right? Which
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is really nice. I think that's important as
Yeah,
well.
keeping that like personal and business separated as well,
Exactly.
right? Um,
Yeah.
and what are some of the things you would tell business owners? Like we're kind of talking about it right now with the profit and loss, but what are some of the key points business owners should be looking at, like on like a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, to kind of keep an eye on when they are looking at their spreadsheets or they're like inputting?
Yeah, so I usually tell my clients to look at profit and loss. You want to look at it monthly. Um, but then you also want to look at it for like the fiscal year to date. So say your year end is December 31st, which a lot of people are. So we're now in July. So you kind of want to be looking at your profit and loss from January 1st to June 30th. Like you want to do those comparisons as well.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely you want to be making sure your income, like the gross sales, make sure that that's, if it's lower than last year, why? Like what happened that it's lower than last year, or even lower than 2 years ago? You want to really be comparing your expenses as well. Why am I spending more money in product? Have the suppliers changed their rates? That sort of thing. Am I spending more on travel? Am I to fuel to go to clients, whatever it may be? So kind of just like nitpicking in a way, like going line by line, like you really just want to see if you're making more money. Like every year you should be making a little bit more than you did the year before. Keeping an eye on those expenses. I find there are some things that people will spend money on and it's just like, why do you need to be purchasing that? Is there a better way to do this? One I know it's not like spa related, but one is contractors, for example, equipment rental versus actually purchasing the piece of equipment. Like you
Mm-hmm.
can spend so much money, and it could be the same with a spa, for example. Say
Yeah,
you're doing laser hair removal.
exactly.
You
Yeah.
know, like it does it just make more sense to buy that piece of equipment and hire somebody in full time to do the service rather than subcontracting it, like
Mm-hmm.
things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So you really just have to know like what your expenses are, what your income is, why there's fluctuations. Um, and then sometimes you got to just cut back a little on spending. And some years are better than others. You know, when COVID
Mm-hmm.
hit, like
Yeah.
you can't be spending a lot of money.
No,
Um,
exactly.
so it's just kind of going line by line. It's always good to look at the overall big picture to see what your profits are,
Mm-hmm.
but you also want to be looking at each individual item.
Yes.
I mean, you want to make more money, so
And that's something really interesting. Like, even I think of like advertising. Some people probably spend like a crazy amount on advertising, but it's like, are you actually being able to track how much that advertising is bringing in for you? Um,
Mhm.
like having a trackable QR code or having something like a coupon where people can bring it in and you can track it. Cause I know that's something like I've started like to see different trends in different advertising we've tried. I mean, we don't really need to advertise, but now that we're bringing in more Medi services, I want people to know we're offering these, or even our spray tan booth, for example. And yeah, I'm like, okay, I could throw a magazine. I did this at the beginning when we first started doing like a wedding ad magazine. And I was like, how many weddings did I even book from that? And I spent how much money advertising that? So I think that's another thing of finding things that are trackable, even vehicle expenses. Like, do you really need to buy a new car? Is that even a business? It depends if it's a business expense or not, but there's different things that I know you and I have had those conversations too about, like, what makes sense within the business. Should you be spending or saving at this point?
Exactly. The advertising one it's a big one. Like people can spend thousands of dollars a year, and if you don't know like where your clientele is coming from, you could be throwing away money at that point
Mhm.
on certain types of advertising. I know a lot of people now, especially in like the beauty industry, they're hiring influencers, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're not getting the clientele or people are not buying your product via those influencer codes, it doesn't make sense to pay to have that or transition to a different type of influencer or something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, advertising is, I find that's probably one of the biggest ones that people
Mhm.
think it's a great thing. Oh, this is my marketing budget for the year. But did it actually bring you any income or any new business?
Yeah.
So,
Something else I get the girls to ask a lot at the spa is how, if it's a new client coming in, because we do know when they're new clients coming in the system, I'll ask, how did you hear about us? And almost 90%, 99 probably percent is referrals. So it's
mhm.
like, even thanking your client who referred that specific client the next time they're in, like writing a note in their file, like, oh, thank Diane for suggesting Mary to come here or something, like having like that rapport with them. But those are, I think the biggest thing is taking care of those healthy relationships instead of maybe putting money into advertising, like doing like a client appreciation or doing like a gift with purchase or something for them to thank them for being such loyal clients.
Oh, 100%, especially in your industry when it's going to be repeat customers.
Hmm.
It's not just one time. If they're happy with the service, they're going to be coming back over and over. And yeah, to spend the money on keeping those clients and keeping them happy, fantastic. Like, I think that's such a good way to do things. And definitely like getting the girls to ask, like, oh, how did you hear about us? But
Hmm.
I think a lot is just word of mouth. Like, you want to know you're going somewhere that's reputable, they do good work, they have friendly staff. And I think that's where a lot of people get their business from is just referrals,
Hmm.
100%.
Hmm. Now, when starting a business too, do you suggest clients to do like a business plan, like and budgeting, like the year of like what they would suggest on moving forward with their business in that physical year, and then kind of stepping back and reassessing it, like you said, like looking at your profit and loss in like quarters, but then also at the end of the year?
Yeah, definitely. Like keeping an eye on your profit and loss throughout the whole year, but definitely really honing in on it at the end of each fiscal year, just to make sure you're in line with where you want it to be. And then set a budget for the following year. I know a few of my clients, we used to have huge meetings. It'd be like all day long, strictly going over budgeting for the upcoming year and making sure like you can put a budget together, but if you're not actually tracking against that
Hmm.
budget, it's almost useless. So putting that budget together and then making sure you have those particular categories set up in your QuickBooks or whatever software you're using in that account so you can track against it. So, when you're at the first quarter, you can say, where are we at with our advertising? Are we in line with what our budget said? Are we in line with our meals and entertainment? A lot of people do client meetings or staff appreciation meals, stuff like that. So, just tracking every quarter against your budget. So maybe you need to cut back in the second and third quarters or whatever it may be. I know a big one is Christmas parties.
Hmm.
People do huge and then they're like, oh, I didn't think it was going to be that much money. And it's like, you really got to, with a budget, you can even chunk it out into
Yep.
quarters. Like summertime in Muskoka is really busy. So maybe we put a little bit more of our meals and entertainment into those summer months so we can treat our staff to lunches and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, but it's, yeah, really important to know your numbers and then put a budget together for the upcoming year. So you know exactly what you're going to be spending your money on.
That's a really great idea. I never thought of it that way, of like the budgeting throughout and then tracking again. Like I really like that. Is there any like key takeaways that you would suggest for business owners? Like any advice kind of as our closing notes, Leanne?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, definitely if you're starting a new business, even if you have an existing business, having a solid software program in place. Like I said, I love QuickBooks Online. It's user friendly for me as a bookkeeper, your accountants, you as the client. I would say that is number one. If you're overwhelmed, I really think business owners need to be focusing on growing their businesses. And I know that the paperwork and the bookkeeping can get out of hand. And if you get behind on that, it just makes a mess of things. So, I mean, it's a good investment to have a bookkeeper. And I'm not saying that because I am
No,
one. Like,
100%.
it really is. Like, it can keep you in line. It helps to manage your cash flow, meet financial obligations, planning for the future growth if you need to buy assets, if you want to hire staff. Just having somebody who can look at your numbers and help you understand, I think is so beneficial to any company for sure.
I 100% agree. And keeping yourself accountable too, of like knowing, okay, they're going to be waiting for this information. I better get organized. So then they've got the files in time, and the communication, like you and Teresa are great with communication, and like, and keeping me feel comfortable of what's going on too. Like you guys are always keeping me in the loop with everything. And it's just been like a great, I'll meet your sister one day. I'm sure we'll get to meet in person one of these days. But yeah, I always say like my business wouldn't be what it is today without your help. And like I said, we've have this work relationship for close to 8 years now, which is incredible. So I'm forever grateful for you.
Well, we love working with you, Nicole. You're so fantastic, and we really, really appreciate your kind words.
Aw.
But I think it's great, and you're just gonna grow from here.
Aw, thank you so much. Well, we'll chat soon, and thanks for jumping on, Leanne. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nicole. Take care.